Well, good morning, church. Thank you for joining us on our deep dive. Today, we finish the book of James. It's only two verses, James 5, 19 and 20. So I'm going to read the two verses before we talk about it. It says, "My dear brothers and sisters, if someone among you wanders away from the truth and is brought back, you can be sure that whoever brings a sinner back from wandering will save that person from death and bring about the forgiveness of many sins." Well, as we close this part in James, we've said before that James is kind of like the Proverbs of the New Testament. So he kind of jumps around a little bit, and if you're reading the other passage, you're going, whoa, why did he jump into this? Well, I really think James was trying to show the importance that we have as believers to care about other believers. Remember, he starts this book talking about the believers. Again, he's writing this to the Jewish Christians about how they're going to struggle, how they're going to face trial, how they're going to face temptation, and how important it was to stay strong. Well, guess what? Some of them didn't stay strong. Some of them were wiped out by these trials, and because of it, they've walked away from the faith. Now, some people will look and say, he says here about believers, are they losing their salvation? No, he's not talking about that. He's talking about ones who are losing their way, ones that are losing their hope. When he talks about death, he's not talking about separation from God. He's talking about death literally happening because of the sin and because of what they had done. Kind of the understanding, if we are a child of God, we can lose God's blessing, we can lose God's fellowship, but we don't lose relationship with him. A great example is that of the prodigal son. Remember, as he leaves the father, as he kind of rejects his father, he takes his inheritance and he goes and lives a life totally opposite of what would have been right with his father. He never stopped being a son. As a matter of fact, when he comes back, the father welcomes him back into the household. See, he never stopped being a son, but he lost the protection. He lost the blessings. He lost the fellowship. And so if we are to do what really pleases God, remember the two great commands: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, your neighbor as yourself. Well, listen, if we love God, we'll not just care about those who don't know Christ, who have never known Christ, but we're going to care about those who knew Christ and have fallen away. Listen, I'm a parent, and if you want to show you love me, care about my kids. If my kids are in danger, step in to help them. And so a love for God is reaching out to those who have fallen from the faith. It's also a love from them, for them, because we're protecting them from the danger they are facing. Remember, Paul in Corinthians warned the church how they were abusing the Lord's Supper, and because of that, he said many were sick and some had died. Literally, the punishment for what they had done, God was letting them die. And so there is a warning here, and James is saying, don't do that. Don't just let them go, but reach out to them. James doesn't really tell us why, so I want to go to another verse. It's Galatians chapter 6, verse 1. Paul said this. He says, "Dear brothers and sisters, if any believer is overcome by sin, you who are godly should gently and humbly help that person back to the right path. But be careful not to fall into the same temptation yourself." I love this because first, Paul says it's a job for those who are spiritual. In other words, you need to be a person who really loves people. And the reason you want them to be pulled back is not retribution, not that they pay for what they've done or for walking away from their faith or for not living a godly life. See, Christ paid that price. The real desire shouldn't be retribution, but restoration. And so here's what I say. You may have some people in your life who used to come to church. They used to walk with God, and they've kind of faded away. And we can easily just kind of look and say, well, that's between them and God. But just as we care for those who've never known God, we want to care for those who know God and who've maybe wandered away from the faith. Sometimes it's as simply as making a phone call. Sometimes it may be, again, inviting them to lunch, talking to them, listening, encouraging them to reconnect to God. I remember one time I stopped by to see my friend, and he was a really close friend, had kind of went far from God, and it was really going to be a casual conversation. And we just started talking, and that conversation led him to talk about several things he was involved in. He realized he shouldn't, and it was kind of unique because I didn't set out with that. I really just wanted to reconnect to friendship. And yet in that, I remember the next day he called me and said, listen, I did business with God, and you know what? I'm out of this relationship that wasn't a good relationship. I'm following him again, and now it's some 30 years later, he's walking with God, and he'll say, that's a time that God used me just because of my presence. I didn't set out to see him straightened out, but God used it to convict him and draw him to yourself. So I just want to say, as James challenged, if we see someone wandering from the faith, we see someone we know, especially someone we have a relationship with, let's reach out, let's connect. God might use you as that tool to draw them back into a relationship that will be helpful for them, but also pleasing to God. Hey guys, I hope you've enjoyed the book of James. We aren't done with our deep dive. We continue tomorrow. Thank you so much for being part of this with us.